He fell back and noticed the red horizontal bar in the top left corner of his vision was half gone. When he fell to the ground, the wasp pulled its stinger out of his arm and flew towards his head. He screwed his eyes shut as he awaited a poisonous needle to the face. But nothing happened. He peeked a glance, opening one eye. He saw the wasp flying lazily around the imp, who looked at him dispassionately.
"Well, what have we learned?"
the imp asked, putting emphasis on the last word. WTF! James shouted.
"Well, I hope you've learned more than that,"
the imp replied sarcastically. Why didn't any of my skills or actions work? And why did that hurt so much? Why is it still hurting? And why did that hurt so much? James's voice grew louder and shriller with each question.
"I already told you, noob. You're not your character. I told you twice. You are not a level 167 thief. Those classes don't exist the way they did in the game. It requires a lot for you to qualify for a profession, and you are nowhere near that powerful yet. Don't worry about it. Right now you are just some guy with 2 wasp stings in his arms drooling on the moss. You have been sent to the land from your world. You are really here, not your character. Check out your status page."
How? James asked. He would deny it till his dying day, but there was a bit of a whine in his voice now.
"Will it?"
the imp replied simply. Shutting the throbbing in his arms out of his mind for a moment, he focused on wanting to see his status page. Suddenly, his vision was blocked by a translucent rectangle. Name unknown. Age 24. Level 1, 0%. Health 100. Mana 100. Stamina 100. He focused back on the imp, who started talking again.
"So I guess you now know you're the definition of a basic bitch."
Excuse me? James was convinced that he had misheard. The wasp stings had been embarrassing, but this was just too much.
"I was chosen to speak to you because I have paid attention to your world. It means there is a slightly higher chance of an ape like you understanding when an enlightened being like myself deigns to speak with you. Now, seeing as how my wasp has just made you its bitch and your stats are all basic, ipso facto my earlier assertion of your status. Any more questions?"
James just stared at the imp with his mouth hanging slightly open, swollen arms hanging at his sides, blinking in disbelief.
"Anyway, you'll be able to examine your stats in greater detail later. Do you know the difference between abilities and skills?"
Shaking his head at the imp's ridiculous attitude, James replied, "Abilities are things you were born with or given to you. Skills are what you can learn. But I don't know what marks are."
"That makes sense. They weren't included in the game you played. Marks will appear as small tattoos on your body. They can indicate allegiances or increases in abilities you have picked up. I'm told technically they can represent religious affiliations as well, but since there aren't any gods in the land, no one knows for sure. Right now I'm guessing you have nothing in any of these areas. Do you?"
James examined his 2 abilities more closely. Limitless. You can proceed to any level in any skill with 100% affinity. Gift of tongues. You can speak and understand any language once exposed to it. You cannot speak to lower life forms or higher beings. He related these to the imp, whose face took on a look of surprise. The small being cast a spell, waving its hand in the air and rattling off an incantation. A blue glow surrounded its hand for a moment before winking back out of existence.
"So that's why he's invested in you,"
the imp said under its breath. It looked at James and continued.
"Gift of tongues is pretty self-explanatory. You can understand humanoids and other sentient beings, but not animals or beings of higher power like myself. For example, Shirin Kafrin Parulcha. Did you understand any of that?"
"No," he replied. "What did it mean?"
"Don't worry about it," the imp said with a smirk. "Your language ability will definitely be useful. It even seems to extend to understanding written languages, which similar abilities and spells normally don't. What is truly interesting is your other ability. I'll try to speak slowly and use small words so you can understand. Every creature born has a predisposition to being good at some things and bad at others. You might be a natural dancer, so you have an 80% chance to increase your level with practice. You might be naturally clumsy, and so only have a 10% chance of increasing as a pickpocket. In that case, you will almost assuredly have a low skill level, no matter how much you practice. Apparently, whatever you try to learn, you have the ability to increase with no cap. You could one day be very powerful,
it said thoughtfully.
I would keep the knowledge about this ability to myself if I were you. There are those who would neutralize you now for fear of what you will become.
But not you? James asked.
I was well paid to advise you. Trust me when I say that you're lucky to have me. The universe is a big place, and I don't think I have too much to fear from one human. Besides, for an eternal being like myself, if I can't be trusted to do a job, I won't get many more.
Fair enough, James wheezed. He was still trying to breathe through the pain, but it was starting to make focusing on the conversation a bit difficult.
Now I'm sure by that pained expression on your face you've realized that your health is not restoring. Lower health means more pain. Low mana makes it harder to think, and low stamina makes you sluggish and weak. While magic and stamina will replenish over time, your health will not without prolonged rest or healing magic. As a Chaos Seed, you will heal faster than others, wounds improving over hours rather than days. But still it will take time without help. As so?
The imp waved its hand, and shadowy tendrils extended to touch James's arms, finally providing relief to the burning aches. James immediately started breathing easier, seeing the red bar of his health growing. "Thank you so much," he almost cried in relief. "I'm obviously completely lost here, and despite that first cheap shot, I appreciate your help. Would you please tell me your name so I can address you properly?" The imp smiled genuinely for the first time.
You may call me Zetrix. That is, of course, not my real name. You must never give your real name, as with the right knowledge or abilities, it might allow great power over you. Now, with that said, what should people call you?
A translucent screen appeared in front of his gaze again. It simply said, "Name," and had a blinking cursor after it. James thought for a moment, happy with the advice. His character, Silk, had served him well, but if what Zetrix said was true, then his power could increase exponentially. If he really was in a new world, he planned on getting as strong as possible and making an impact. He would shake the ground, and his accomplishments would only be measured by... James smiled and looked at Zetrix. "My name is Richter,"